What's up guys, Mickle here, and we just got a brand new interview from Brad Garlinghouse that I believe is one of the best interviews I have seen from Brad in a very long time. In this video, I'm going to break down the most important parts from that interview you need to be paying attention to, because this thing was over 40 minutes long, so I want to condense it into the most important parts and give you my thoughts on some of this. Guys, we got some very interesting nuggets in here, including some things that I've been speculating behind the scenes for a while now. Guys, I think this really shows that there's going to be a lot of major announcements after this case ends. Make sure to stick around for that. It's really exciting. Like always, your support means so much to this channel. Thank you to everyone who takes the time to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. These two things really do help me out so much. Also, if you're in a good place to buy some XRP, make sure to check out my favorite exchange uphold down in the description of this video. With that said, though, let's jump right into it, and I hope you guys enjoy the content. Because I want to start out this video and just quickly bring something to your attention, because I think it goes along with the entire theme of Brad Garlinghouse's interview, and that is a brand new amendment that was just proposed on the XRP ledger, which is on-chain verifiable credentials. Now, guys, I'm not going to jump into exactly what this means right now. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of time to cover this as it goes through the voting process, but once again, we see Ripple is taking steps to bring compliance to the XRP ledger. This is something that's not being done on any other chain out there. It is completely unique to what Ripple wants to bring to the XRP ledger. And ultimately, I believe it goes perfectly with what Ripple's goal is for XRP over the long term. It's not to be some retail facing financial system. It's not to build a couple DeFi products that a couple fringe users are going to use to generate unrealistic yields. Instead, they are looking to turn the XRP ledger into an institutional grade blockchain, something that the largest businesses in the world can utilize. Guys, the largest businesses in the world have to follow compliance. Compliance is key to everything they do, and they're not going to adopt new products if those products can't fit within their compliance needs. Guys, what Ripple is doing is bringing new amendments to the XRP ledger to make it compliance focused, and that way institutions take advantage of the faster payments, the cheaper settlement, the instant liquidity without having to think about the implications on the compliance side of their business. Guys, almost no other chain out there is focusing on this. They are building all kinds of different things like NFTs, JPEGs, meme tokens, all of these different things that institutions aren't going to care about. Ripple is focusing on what matters here, and that is building out products that's ultimately going to bolster adoption from the top level people. I say this all the time. Most other chains are focused on retail. They're focused on marketing to me and you. Ripple is not focusing on that. This is not an amendment that's going to be flashy with retail holders. It is an amendment that is made so institutions, when they come in, can onboard their customers in a fast and efficient manner without having to worry about what regulators are going to say about it. I want to move on though and get into Brad Garlinghouse's interview, and I think what we're going to talk about for the rest of this video is really going to be in line with that amendment we just talked about, because Brad Garlinghouse really hammered on the idea in this interview that compliance is key, and what Ripple is looking to do is really different than the rest of the industry. Now guys, in this interview, Brad Garlinghouse talked about a whole bunch of things: Ripple versus SEC, working with Coinbase and a Grayscale, Ethereum maximalism, US versus the rest of the crypto world, Tom Emmer, pro crypto, the Peanut Butter Manifesto, and so many other things. But in this video, I just wanted to highlight on the main takeaways I had, and the first one being the fact that Jack McDonald is the one interviewing Brad Garlinghouse here. Jack McDonald is the former CEO of PolySign, and now he's coming over to Ripple. Guys, this whole situation between Ripple and PolySign to me is fascinating. Obviously, PolySign was bought in part by Ripple. Now Ripple is kind of eating up a lot of the people who are working there. This whole dynamic is extremely fascinating, but the most important thing I'm taking away from this is that PolySign and Standard Custody had a lot of licenses in the United States, specifically in New York, one of the hardest jurisdictions to get licensing in. I believe a lot of this has to do with Ripple building compliance in the United States, building the gateways to onboard United States customers. Ripple understands that their case against the SEC is coming to an end. And once that ends, they are going to be able to make a US push that is massive. They're going to have the regulatory clarity, and their customers are no longer going to be worried about the reputation or the black eye of actually adopting Ripple's technology. Now, guys, this is something that's been speculated on for a while, and I, on this channel, have made a lot of comments about it. I have said, hey, a lot of people are expecting these major announcements, these major developments in the United States because XRP now has clarity, but what people are forgetting is that institutions don't want to go against the SEC. And I constantly brought up on this channel the time where Elon Musk got sued by the SEC, and many of Tesla's banking partners actually claimed that they weren't going to bank Tesla anymore because of that lawsuit. Now, I brought up this example to show you guys that institutions really don't care about the logical approach. If you're getting sued by the SEC, they essentially refuse to work with you. So despite the fact that XRP got clarity, a lot of the institutions out there still see Ripple in this case and say, okay, we're not going to work with you. We're not going to make any announcements until it's wrapped up and done. And guys, that is something I was speculating on in the background, but Brad Garlinghouse actually confirmed it in this interview. And it actually went farther than I would have ever imagined. Brad Garlinghouse said in this interview that he had banking institutions personally debank him because of the Ripple SEC case. Guys, this really does show that the institutions in the United States were being hyper conservative around this Ripple SEC case. So conservative that they took actions to debank Brad Garlinghouse himself because of the lawsuit. There is no way any of these institutions would ever pursue a partnership with Ripple or even make any announcements about partnerships with Ripple in the background if they were going to the extreme of debanking Brad Garlinghouse. Now, guys, the good news is I think this is all going to be over very soon. I think once this case is over, all of these different institutions are going to reevaluate their relationship with Ripple and say, oh, now that this is over, we can now work with you and we can start pushing some of these products. That is exactly what happened with Tesla. But I thought it was so interesting that Brad Garlinghouse actually confirmed that this was happening, because this lets us know that Ripple has likely been making some massive strides behind the scenes, but most of the institutions just need to be hyper conservative about what they let loose to the public. This to me is massive confirmation that when this case is done, we are likely going to see a whole bunch of partnerships, a whole bunch of development that has kind of been being held from us. And guys, one of those things that was speculated is some of Ripple's partners right around the world. And at the same exact time this interview came out, we found out that we are going to likely see a host of new currencies scheduled to be put on Ripple and the XRP ledger later this year. Guys, this goes directly to what Brad was saying in this interview about Ripple's expansion into the UK, Southeast Asia, Middle East, and Brazil. And while a lot of people say, oh, this stinks, they're not focusing on the United States, I wish they could get into the US system, which I agree with, I think there's kind of a hidden positive here. Ripple is going to succeed in the United States. They're a US-based company. There's almost no other US-based cryptocurrency company. Ripple has people from JP Morgan, BlackRock, the Treasury. Ripple is cemented in the United States in my eyes. The place Ripple was going to have a harder time getting traction and expanding was in the rest of the world. But because the SEC has essentially stifled the industry in the United States, Ripple has been forced to focus on the rest of the world and really build out their business in all these other jurisdictions. While it's not ideal that they have to start there and not the United States, the good news is no one's gaining traction in the United States. The United States is off limits. So Ripple can come back to the United States. I think they're still going to dominate that market, but in the interim, they got to test their products with all these different countries and nations and really start building out their business in places that traditionally would have been much harder for them to make ground in. So ultimately, I think this could end up being a blessing in surprise. It's not like Ripple is the only one being held back in the United States. It's everyone. But Ripple was still able to expand around the world, probably at a much faster pace than they would have been able to do if they were focusing on the US. So ultimately, I think Ripple is going to make massive strides around the world. And when the United States is turned on, they are going to be one of the players that benefits most. They have a board of directors who knows how to get them in the room with the most important players in the United States financial system. And that's something almost no other project can say. And guys, the last thing I want to focus on here is just how lucky we are to have a CEO like Brad Garlinghouse at Ripple. He has really stuck to what I believe is the key to mass adoption of this industry. Building products that are institutionally focused. What Brad Garlinghouse really confirms in this interview is that he is 100% focused on bringing institutions utility using cryptocurrency. Guys, this is the most important thing in my eyes. A lot of people have different theses on these markets, what's going to win, but for me, it has always been simple. It is the simple fact that cryptocurrencies offer something to the system today that we don't currently have, and that's instant settlement. A lot of people are focused on how instant settlement helps retail. To me, while it's important to retail, it's not the holy grail. The holy grail is bringing instant settlement to financial institutions that are moving billions to trillions of dollars. Ripple is focused on what matters here, and that is building out those products for those institutions. These are the institutions I believe that are going to drive most of the changes in our financial system and onboard most of the volume we are going to see in these networks. Ripple continues to work with the regulators. Ripple continues to work with jurisdictions that are progressive. And as Brad Garlinghouse says in this interview many times, he doesn't believe the United States is going to stay hostile. He believes the United States is ultimately going to get it. And when they do, that compliance first strategy is going to win out in helping Ripple dominate most of these markets. As another little nugget in here that I know people are going to be wondering about is that Brad Garlinghouse actually did talk about an IPO. He said essentially the United States SEC is just too hostile right now, and he wants to wait for things to kind of ease up there before any of that happens. I think that totally makes sense. Brad is going to be focused on other nations until the US comes online. And when the US comes online, I believe his goal there is going to be to dominate the US market. I believe, like I said before many times, they have the partnerships in place to do that. And I could not be more excited for when this case wraps up, when we get some legislation, when we get a pro cryptocurrency SEC. Guys, at that point, Ripple is going to have every major tailwind at their back. And I believe we are going to see an expansion that makes everything we have seen so far in this industry look minuscule. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed this update. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe. It really does mean so much. And for now, Mickle out.